But I'll start with you, Ambuj. What is the most important factor to consider when finalizing a cloud strategy for your company? Ambuj, would request you to please unmute yourself.
Oh, so sorry. I just realized I was talking on mute. So sorry about it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking this, actually, Anisha. So a very good afternoon to the fellow participants in the discussion. So as to answer your question, Anisha, I think I will put 5-6 important points when deciding our cloud strategy, actually, opting for a cloud strategy. First and foremost, I believe, is the regulatory requirements, right? So if there are any specific regulatory requirements that I need to consider when I'm opting for a cloud is of utmost importance. So for example, if I talk about banking sector predominantly, where they continue to dictate or mandate that people should have, or the banks should have the on-premise setups only. Whereas this is not very categorically mandated in other sides, actually, right? The second important thing that I feel is the security of the cloud provider, which typically I believe that the cloud providers already have pick to choose setups already. But very important thing that I think is whether we are ready to surrender the control of our IP in a cloud environment, the environment which we do not own, or which is not in direct control, actually. Third important thing that I believe is the location of the data, right? And why I say so is because there are specific requirements around, let's say, if I talk of my industry in particular, which deal with the personally identified information of its customers and its employees, etc. There's specific requirements that are required to be met, right? So specific data types, whether we can take it off or not. So choosing a location which helps you spontaneously move around in the time of need is very essential attribute when it comes to deciding it, right? The next important thing is how capable is the cloud provider in its data disaster recovery scenarios, right? So I believe that very important, while backup strategy is something that is at hand, we can decide it, but how effectively a cloud provider can help in the time of disasters is its essential element, right? It's very important that the cloud provider that you're choosing supports it. Next important thing I think every IT person will look at is the scalability, which is the pay as you go model, and I think most cloud providers do opt for it. They do provide this, actually. Lastly, I believe important aspect is the reliability, right? So considering the fact that how basically the margin of error the cloud provider supports or has. So for example, power outages or security issues, what is its exposure in terms of these reliability factors? I think these are the ones that we look at when we decide our strategy.
Right. So Ambuj has talked about backup recovery, about regulatory requirements, and many things that have helped their organization decide what is a cloud strategy for them. Sumit, I'll come to you. Ambuj also mentioned about losing or this fear about losing control in the cloud. I mean, how critical is that? Do you feel that you have lesser control because things have migrated to the cloud? Is that an important reason or an important factor to weigh when you decide your cloud strategy?
I think public cloud actually thrives on self-service. So it actually gives you more control, especially from a developer perspective. It gives you an ambit of options while without going into complexity of how the backend infrastructure is designed. So I don't think that's one criteria which actually is a parameter which I look at when I decide where I need to host my application, what should be my strategy. I think just to add on what Ambuj said, I think there are 6-7 factors additional to what Ambuj said, which I would like to just add. First is the scale of operations. So typically, if your compliance allows it and your scale of operation is not that big, the value that public cloud provides supersede whatever you can build on yourself. So that's the reason most startups, which are whether small or medium size, they continue to be on cloud, because the value which they can harness by just being on the cloud is way more than being on private cloud or anywhere else. Another thing is application design on the architecture. I think most of the days now, many applications which people, especially in the internet companies, design, they are cloud native. So they rely on PaaS offerings of various providers. So in the end, they actually, although they can be run on premise, but it's again, it creates way more complexity and way more maintenance and overheads for a company to manage in-house. So if your application design is cloud native, it's actually more makes sense for you to keep it on public cloud as opposed to running it on premise. Another thing which Ambuj already mentioned, I would like to just add on is pay-per-use. While pay-per-use is very, very important, it's also important for us to know what our traffic profile is. Because people talk about auto scale, but at many times they don't even need auto scale, or they need auto scale only for 2% or 5% of their application. So they are actually losing out on moving to public cloud as opposed to gaining anything. So one needs to consider what kind of application profile they have, whether there is a busty profile in which there is a sudden expectation of traffic, or the dynamics in which, or the industry in which they operate is actually very, very dynamic. Another obviously is proximity to users. So everybody wants things to be really fast, applications and the experience to users to be really, really, really good. So you want to make sure your application is as close to your users as possible. So you would like to leverage things like serverless, which are natively available in the platform, or CDN, which actually provides way more capabilities to accelerate the application performance and help in customer retention. Last, I think the skills also plays a lot big role. I think one needs to have capabilities to understand how to run and manage a small or medium-sized cloud, which runs 24/7 on-premise or in cloud. And I think be it managing it, be it patching it, be it doing capacity planning, and overall how they want to run and think about their governance model.
All right. Yash, what would you like to say? Sumit is putting his point of view on what drove their strategy. For you, what is the most critical function? And I want to understand, when you pick up a cloud strategy, is it to smoothen things up? Is it, are you looking for ways to make a business grow as well?
Right. I guess most of the points have been covered by Ambuj and Sumit, most of the relevant ones. I think just to sum it up, probably what I can do is just sum up as to what has been said. There is one important factor that needs to be considered is the relative value that one derives out of the cloud. Any kind of IT innovation that one company, one organization wants to adopt, it is absolutely important for the organization to know what is the relative value or what is the advantage that it is going to get, right? Whether I move to the cloud or I remain on-prem or wherever. So the strategy has to be absolutely clear in defining as to what the advantage is going to be. All these factors, whether it is the security, the SLAs, I think we mentioned the governance part. Sumit also mentioned how complexity is important to understand, whether the expertise is there or not. All these factors do play a very important role. We start with the advantages that we are going to get. Then we look at these smaller points or the sub points. I think most of those points have been mentioned. I would just want to talk a bit on the regulation part that plays a very important role now in the adoption strategy. Although it is not not a functional part, but more of an administrative and a governance issue. And this is going to play a very important role, I think, in the future as well, because the regulation, especially the data residency part, how and where the data is residing. I think Ambuj mentioned a bit about it. And I think that is one of the most important parts when it comes to deciding where or how we are going to adopt it. So to sum it up, I think all the points functionally, but more important are the governance. And yes, the overall, the most important part is the relative value that this probable innovation, I would call it, would come to the organization.
Okay, regulation is important, but just business growth. Could you dwell on that a little bit as well?
Yes. See, again, it depends as to what the requirement is. What is the objective of moving to the cloud? Yes, the flexibility, the expansion happens, and I'll tell you one thing. The mere decision that an organization has taken to move to the cloud does not necessarily mean that it is actually deriving any benefit out of it. See, the idea is that an organization has to be exactly clear as to what benefits it is going to derive out of that innovation or out of that step. If it is a business growth, and one, it is not just the initial thing. It's easy to lift and shift and go from an on-prem to a cloud because it offers a lot of flexibility in expanding. But the point is that, am I really going to use that particular part of that cloud or the essential function of the cloud based on which I had taken that decision? Yes, if my business is going to grow, if I am assuming that there would be a requirement, and yes, the infra is going to grow, yes, it certainly makes sense. But again, it has to be compared. Business growth, whether it is on-prem, hybrid, or a pure cloud model, if that is the driving factor, yes, I think that is going to play a very important role. And yes, cloud is going to help certainly in that, as far as the expansion goes. Easy expansion, I would say, the speed at which the expansion happens.
All right. So, Ambuj, we've understood, what factors you keep in mind when you decide your, cloud strategy. Then, how do you maximize your own application stack for, your mission critical functions? How do you build your own application stack?
Yeah. I think we started this cloud journey almost a year and a half back. I would say rather prior to that. Some of our critical systems have been put on various multi-cloud environments. We are heavily into AWS and then Azure, and we also started looking into Google as such. So when I have to build my application stack in the cloud environments, the first and foremost thing that I consider at that point was that do I have the requisite talent which is needed, right? Are the developers is the developer enabled enough to code for applications that are cloud native, right? Second very important thing that we've considered is what will be the architecture of the application, right? And what will be the service model for that application. So which essentially links that let's say if I'm trying to put something on the customer parameters, right? So how will this solution be architected at a component level, at an access level, and then how will this be serviced to the end user, basically, right? Defining the tech stack, which essentially means Sumit was just mentioning about CDN, right? So if it is a very heavy application and a very heavy application for consumer, actually. So considering the application and the data that application deals is, we consider what will be at the edge, right? So for example, it has a essential cover from CDN, whether it covers for the perimeter requirements such as WAF, etc. Second, I would call the important utilities, which essentially gives various parameters, right? Parameters in terms of performance, parameters in terms of doing various kind of analytics, XYZ things. Third important thing is that what we considered was how will the DevOps be considered. So whether we will invest in Jenkins skins, or we'll invest in a big bucket, all of that. And then building, the DevSecOps, which essential tools are needed in terms of, plugging the security bit in the DevOps was an essential aspect at that point in time. And we did a lot of research, exploring technologies, etc., to see whether they have integration capabilities, etc., with the solution needed, right? The next important thing is very important, is the business tools. So for example, can I stitch the whole ITSM bit in the cloud model? How will I do the application bug management? Which tools would be the essential requirements for this? How will the code be enabled there? So, all of that, right? uh, Finally, I think a very important aspect is on the testing bit, right? How will I do the functional testing? How will I do the regression testing? Do I have capabilities, or is this already available for pick and choose in the environment that I'm looking at, right? Lastly, the bit is to launch it, right? Launching it in terms of creating a checklist and making sure that the checklist has already been very diligently followed before enabling it as a rollout for the consumers.
All right. So a lot of points covered there, very comprehensive, Ambuj. That's what would you say? The kind of stacks you would build, it's not necessarily the same would be applied in some other organizations. How does one build their own unique, proposition?
Sorry, is this question?
Yes, Dr. Sharma, that's for you.
Okay, sorry. So you're talking about the stack building. I think what has been pointed out by Ambuj makes a lot of sense. Building a stack, again, as I said, whenever we decide to go on a cloud or the strategy, it is important that what are the benefits that are to be derived out of it are explicitly mentioned and are known by the organization. The success factor, I believe, have I lost you? Am I the only one not seeing it? Or
no, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I thought I've lost this. Okay, so as I was saying, that it is important that the success criteria, the success factor is clearly defined. Building a stack would again and majorly be dependent on the requirements. If I have to, for example, let me take a typical example of a solution which has to be offered. And in fact, the last 1 year has actually shown us a lot of requirements wherein the application of the services, if they were offered from a medium such as a cloud, it would have been far beneficial, in terms of the reach that it offers, in terms of the expansion capabilities that is offered. Now, if I have to, let's say, deploy an application which has, and I'm talking about a typical requirement in which there's a lot of sensitive data involved in it. How to build a stack around a particular application or requirement. I would have to very carefully pick and choose the exact requirements in terms of the governance, in terms of the privacy of the data, in terms of the functionality, the uptime, the service model, how soon or how early do I need a response from this application. For this, individually, do I choose the components or do I leave it to the cloud? Because there are a lot of cloud native solutions which are being offered, vis-a-vis a solution which is not a cloud native one. So which one, and do I really go for a pure solution based, or rather application based solution, or do I go for an objective based solution? So I think designing a stack, what is important is defining the objectives. If my objective, let's say, is a X requirement, let's say X millisecond of a round time, then I need to work on that rather than actually saying that, so and so stack is something that I am very comfortable with. This is, I think, rather than actually picking and choosing a particular stack, I think go with the objectives, get the best out of the cloud, because it would defeat the purpose if I go with my own stack and say that it has to be, just imposed onto the cloud model. It is quite possible that there are other solutions which offer a better optimized solution than the one that I am comparing with. So my, net objective is what is important. Define the objectives. Based on the objectives, build the stack. Whether it is a cloud native one or a non-native solution, it depends purely on that.
Okay. What you define as a goal will obviously be a very important, factor for your cloud strategy. But, many companies are looking at things which are not always very streamlined. They could be multi-cloud, private and public cloud, and there may be reasons for that. They have some data that they want to be on either on-premise or on a private cloud. So, want to understand from you, Sumit, how do you build a cohesive, cohesive environment where you have deployed operations or applications across different clouds, but there is this one dashboard where you get all information. Is it easy to build? Is it easy to understand for people who are then using it?
Well, I think it's getting easier, or it's still not easy enough, I would say. We've been on hybrid cloud for almost 8 years now. I think it's always a work in progress. I think key to being a hybrid cloud is you need to be portable. You need to be portable across different clouds. And when you talk about being portable between, let's say, cloud A and cloud B, then I think you have to end up making like tough decisions, like whether I need to start using the value-rich PaaS offerings of a cloud. So if you decide to choose a PaaS offering for a particular cloud, you end up getting into a marriage, which probably might not be offered or possible and to get out of. So it's again, it goes back to what Yash said. I think it all goes down to what you're trying to build and how you plan to see it in the future. So one needs to define what is the end objectives, the end goals, be it from resilient perspective, be it from data localization perspective, be it from performance perspective, be it from regulatory perspective on what they want to do in the short term or in the long term. But I think being, as I mentioned, portability. So I think there are 3 or 4 things one should do definitely. One thing which is a paramount important right now is one should adopt containers. I think gone are the days one should spin out a server and then deploy a code and integrate with Jenkins or a CI/CD pipeline. I think it's important for one to adopt and deploy Kubernetes or any other containers which one choose to. One should also use serverless functions. They are currently portable across different clouds and helps in creating a lot of value. But when you are designing a cloud, you need to think about that you are actually doing some kind of data localization within that cloud, because let's say a cloud A provides an AI ML, which is very interesting and creates a lot of value for you. But a cloud B offers another services which need the same set of data and which is not available on cloud A. Now you have to replicate the data across both the systems to get the benefit of both. But in the end, you end up like spending too much money, because in the end, data has to be replicated across multiple sets. And then you actually have to sort of DR sites as well. So the cost goes exponentially out the roof. So again, it goes back to basic, and you need to design and think about what you want to do in the short term and the long term, and think and plan accordingly. There are services, as I mentioned, you should use microservices. You should adopt a few PaaS offerings. Like there are some PaaS offerings which are portable, which are based on open source, be it like a MySQL based database services or a document database, which actually although they have some kind of a lock-in, but they still, with little effort, you can move from one cloud to another if required. Because in the end, velocity is the need of our, especially in the business or the industry we operate in.
Right. Ambuj, we've heard again, regulatory issues, but how important is it to define security framework for each application that you're going to move to the cloud?
I think the approach to designing any application will be inside out. So, for example, the cloud providers are already giving you the security essentials that are needed from a edge perspective, right? But when it comes to deploying application, I believe data security is to be kept at the core. So you have to design your solutions in line with the kind of data that you're dealing with. So, for example, if it's a business important data, or if it's a financial data, or for that matter, it is your PII information of your customers, right? Keeping this view and then designing your architecture, whether it goes for doing a microservice based architecture, or you go for a monolithic based architecture, it all depends upon the data security requirements, and it comes from the fact that the kind of vertical that you're dealing with, right, and the kind of guidance that you have from your regulator in terms of dealing with that data. For example, whether I would be interested in doing anonymization through a masking or encryption, that's a decision that gets decided when we do the architecture review of an application that is getting seeded. That's how I would table it for now, Anisha.
Right. Dr. Sharma, how about you? How do you see security as the security framework in totality? Do you see it for each application? How important is this component of your cloud strategy?
I think security probably plays the most important factor when it comes to deciding on the cloud. Why I'm saying that it is the most important factor? The differentiating factor between a cloud and an on-prem model is obviously the agility. I think Sumit mentioned the velocity is the need of the hour. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The only differentiating factor is how fast you are. But the point is that the only factor that is to be considered? Am I ready to risk everything that I have? Nowadays, what is happening is that although governance and compliance, as I said, they do not add a lot of value to the functionality, but I should not be saying this. At times, the regulations and the governance kind of act as an impediment towards the development or the deployment of a certain application. Therefore, it is like again, a wrong choice of word, but necessarily evil is something that it has to be necessarily complied with. There is absolutely no way that any organization can do away with these statutory requirements. Yes, therefore I think it becomes a very important part of the decision making. Coming to the security, when everything is in my control, when it is in an on-prem model, I tend to have that perceived notion of the ownership of that data and the security around it. The moment it moves to the cloud, it is quite natural for one to have that small gap of not, the lacuna that I am not owning that data. In fact, that is the reason why all these regulations have been built around it, that it has to be in a particular part of the geographically in a particular country. Therefore, I guess that perceived risk which is there on the cloud, why I'm using this word perceived, because probably the way cloud is maturing and the services are maturing, they are offering similar or maybe even better security than what is being offered on the on-prem model. But the consideration, that small thought in your mind that I do not have full ownership, I do not have the flexibility of doing the kind of things that I would be able to do on the data that is on-prem, plays a very important role. Therefore, I think keeping all those requirements, the typical driving forces or the driving factors, velocity, cost optimization, expertise and all that on one side, and this security thing on the other, I still feel that one needs to start with the security consideration and then move on to the other factors.
right? So security is very, very important.
Yes, certainly.
Sumit, how important is IT service management? Is the process of IT delivery an important part of your entire cloud strategy?
I think IT service management is, I think it's an important part for every organization. But obviously, with cloud harboring the self-service capabilities, providing this to developers directly without routing a ticket through a sysadmin or a network admin or various other things. I think it has definitely evolved a lot more than what it was 3-4 years ago. I think one should with IT service desk typically currently, if let's say I'm running a cloud, I primarily use IT service management to handle events, incidents, respond to real-time issues which are reported by various systems or various feeds, so that I can proactively not just respond, mitigate those threats or any and prevent any, let's say, an outage or a security incident before actually it happens. In IT service management portfolio, I think it's very, very important for one to deploy a tool which helps you automate a lot of these events which are being generated or spitted through cloud platforms, so that issues are handled on its own. Because if you're not going to leverage the intelligence which the cloud actually provides, let's say if you deploy a WAF solution on the cloud, and WAF is generating an alert, and if you do not look at that problem right there and then, an incident has happened, then I think the whole point of deploying that solution is actually of no use. So one needs to figure out and deploy IT service management tools which has AI capabilities, which has orchestration capabilities, which integrates very well with the cloud management framework of your whatever orchestration tool which you are using, whether you're using a native cloud platform or whether you're using a centralized cloud management platform and connecting it with multiple cloud platforms which you're using in the interim. So I think it definitely has changed, but one needs to now focus more on automation, more on responding quickly, efficiently, and without losing time.
Right. Focus on automation. How important is that, Ambuj? And what would you focus on when it comes to automation and how it runs smoothly in a cloud?
I think automation is a key enabler for the business these days. And since the time this pandemic has happened, people are really looking up to automating things. I mean, if I were to talk about my industry, we at airport locations, we've tried to automate almost all processes as possible, right? So I believe that automating is a need of the hour. The only perspective that I have is that while we respect the developers' empathy in the cloud native systems, the only perspective that I have is that we should have a homogeneous view to all these environments, basically, right? So for example, let's say if I'm trying to automate some database related tasks, right? It could be, let's say, to create, let's say the volume, to deal with the volume, or to create additional metrics requirements that there may be, right? The point is that, if we're trying to automate, it should be a homogeneous process and a technology that is contributing to your multi-cloud adoption multi-cloud strategy, basically, right? And gone are the days when people would I would say that security personnel would rather stand up and say that this is not possible because of XYZ reason. The person has to stand up and say that for enabling this, these are my requirements and that have to be met. And that's how people are automating almost all processes, whether you call it change management or deploying code or doing regression testings, etc. All of this is getting automated. In fact, for example, you do your the complete DevSecOps cycle or the CI/CD pipeline. I mean, people have started automating this completely, wherein somebody is developing, somebody is, or somebody is looking at it from a static review, somebody is looking at it from a dynamic review, somebody is calling it, looking at various other tailgates in terms of whether the underlying components are being appropriately hardened or not, and somebody is giving a sign off. This complete whole cycle is getting automated actually, and this is the essential need of R actually. And the businesses, the digitization that is affecting almost all businesses, I think it is affecting all processes. So it is very much needed in today's time. We are also exploring it.
Okay, so automation is the way to go. Now, Dr. Sharma, when you think of a cloud strategy, you obviously want to get the biggest bang for your buck. So, how to maximize the benefits? Is that step one when you're thinking about your strategy? Is it step two? This is our strategy. We've taken on this, and this is what our cloud strategy is going to be, and then look to maximize. When do you, think that you move in to explain to everybody and get everybody on board on how to maximize the cloud?
Okay, so whether it is a cloud adoption, as I said in the beginning, or any other IT project or IT innovation, as is being called, that a company has adopted or is planning to adopt, just because a decision has been taken, let's say, to go to the cloud, does not necessarily mean that the benefits are being derived out of it. And more importantly, it's a long-term thing, especially in the IT projects. Initially, when the onboarding is done, it is easy to see the benefits. However, in a long-term scenario, what is important is to understand how viable a particular project is going to be. That only happens, the viability and the profit coming out of it would happen only if the project or this innovation or that application that one is adopting is being used in the manner that it was earlier envisaged. Now, that is a key factor. More often than not, what happens that initial onboarding happens in a very smooth manner. A lot of value is seen, probably being derived out of it in the first couple of years, but sustainability does not happen. For it to be maximized, it has to be used in the manner it was envisaged. The objectives have to be continuously derived. One has to work with it. It is not a one-time thing. It is not the goal is not to just, for example, take a particular technology or move to the cloud. That is not the aim. The aim is to derive the benefits, which happens only if there is a sustained effort to get the best out of it based on the objectives.
Right. But Sumit, Dr. Sharma said, the IT department will, drop the plan, will bring out the objectives. But for cloud to be really maximized, everybody has to be on board. All, departments whose apps have the cloud have to know how to get the best out of it. So how important is, workforce training and bringing them up to speed on how things can improve and how they can derive the maximum? When do you pencil this in? When making the strategy, or once the cloud is already deployed?
I think it's a continuous process. Again, I think it's a cloud, as everybody mentioned. It's actually a journey. It's not something which you just do once and then you say, okay, now I'll continue to reap benefits of it over a period of time. It's something which is a continuous effort, and continuous effort also has to be put in to train your people. And I think training is tough, especially at the velocity of changes which are actually happening on the platform. Like you see, like new features gets released every week on every platform. Now, if you are on multiple platforms, making sure your team is aware of those new features and capabilities, I think it's like a very daunting task, and it's like a full um, I think it's like a complete role in itself, in which I have to train people to be productive, to be able to harness the value which is currently available in that particular cloud. Now, while one would say okay, let's training is possible through various online programs. But I think training and retentions together is again becoming a big problem, because one actually when one actually gets skilled across multiple platforms, that kind of talent is very difficult to find, and especially in India. Now, I think the easier approach when one deploy a hybrid cloud is to deploy a orchestration layer or a cloud management platform, which integrates with different platform in the backend and only reduces the complexity for the user to deploy and deploy it wherever they want. So let's say somebody is deploying a VM on a cloud A, and now you have plugged in cloud B, there's nothing changes for him because the changes are completely transparent. So a cloud management platform, which actually integrates with different cloud, public or private cloud platform, is a important, um, it actually plays an important role in reducing the training exercise which is required by your people. But obviously, training is still required, because in the end, these platforms are not that feature rich. So you still have to do some customization from the back end. So you still need people to be trained. But again, the more you reduce the human element, the better it becomes.
All right, reducing the human element and it becomes better, but until humans and technology work together, I don't think we'll get the most out of everything. In your experience, Dr. Sharma, uh, workforce training, and do you think the training is good enough to get all that is possible from the cloud?
So one I think that's a very important factor that you just mentioned, training. The advantage, if you look at the cloud, what cloud offers, the kind of technologies that it is now offering for the smaller companies to adopt, it has become so simple for them. Other if you look at a couple of decades back, the requirement that you need to have the manpower, the resources who would be expert in that, then you would deploy the technology and work on it. I think cloud computing has transformed the way the organizations now look at using or leveraging the advantages of compute available. Yes, the human training or the human resource training plays an equally vital and important role, but the difference here being that I do not necessarily need to have that expertise in my team in the beginning itself. I can gradually learn with time, because there is a lot of expertise offered from the service providers on the cloud. In fact, I think that is one of the advantages that, or one of the key factors for deciding the migration to the cloud, because there's a lot of, I am getting the services, I am getting the expertise from the cloud. Even the resources are now getting onto the cloud. Why not leverage that also? Why bother training all the, why bother inventing the wheel when everything is available? I go with that, especially for the small and medium organizations. I think but training should not be that much of an issue in deciding the cloud. I think everything is being offered. Take it from the cloud itself.
Okay, be open-minded and somewhat less fearful. So we're going to wrap this up, and I'm going to take your concluding remarks. Let me start with you, Ambuj. For those who have perhaps started or even thinking about deploying the cloud, maybe they've taken a few baby steps. What's your word of advice?
I think I would say in fact I would try to repeat the same that I said the factors that contribute to deciding, right? So you have to look at your regulatory requirements, and then you have to then you have to look at what are the essential requirements for your business in terms of security, right? Whether you want to architect on a monolithic architectures, or you want to go for microservice based architecture, or you want to opt for Dockers, etc., right? These are very important elements. And alongside all of this, I would say that it is very easy to develop a commodity or an application, but defining your guardrails is of very important factor when it comes to looking at adopting cloud and having a homogeneous view, right? So I would say that looking at defining the guardrails and how do you build the homogeneous view into an environment is of key importance.
All right. And let me take some concluding remarks from you too, Sumit. Your advice for those who want to get the most out of their cloud strategy or want to perhaps improve upon what they're already doing.
Well, I think cloud is the only way going forward. While we currently might be confused among private cloud and public cloud and deploying a hybrid cloud or a community cloud, I think over next 5 years, you will see, and you have already seen that the compliance and regulatory requirements are going thin by the hour. So it's going to be entirely probable, maybe in next couple of years, that a core banking platform of a major bank would be running on the cloud. And when that happens, then the whole the ecosystem will completely change overnight. And that's something which is a reality, which is coming, which nobody can stop, even RBI cannot. So it's cloud is the only future, because in the end, you cannot create everything on your own. And considering key for a business right now is to create value at a max velocity they can. I think cloud helps in giving them a great weapon. Even if they are so small, they can still compete with like a big giant. So if you are on a cloud journey, I think I would say, and if you pass all the check marks which Ambuj mentioned, I think I would say just pick up your stuff and run as fast as you can, and try to harness as much as value as you can. And be it cost, be it performance, be it a customer experience, or be it any other value which you want to create for your end user.
Right. Dr. Sharma, would you like to add something here?
Yes, I would not probably fully subscribe to this view that cloud is the only way forward. I think, yes, there is absolutely no doubt that cloud is empowering. It offers a lot of benefits, especially to the small company, to set up an enterprise class technology stack at the snap of a finger. But yes, at the same time, again, as I said, horses for courses. It depends what your requirement is. Cloud is certainly going to play a very, very important role in the coming years. Absolutely no doubt about it. But yes, large organizations would probably be having a mix of it. Yes, there's going to be a piece of cloud in their ID strategy, but I don't think so. It is the only way. There are other options also, and I think large organizations are going to continue for some time at least.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. We have got a few questions from the audience, and I request you to please answer them as well. So Mr. Girish Kumar is asking how cloud native and container workload is secured. Dr. Sharma, would you like to take that question?
Can you just repeat the question?
The question is how cloud native and container workload is secured.
So again, as I see, whether it is the container workload or any kind of a security that you're looking at the cloud, how is it secured? Again, whenever you have this question, or whosoever is asking this question, one thing is to one very important factor to consider here is how would you secure this in an on-prem environment? Whether what kind of a security measures are you going to adopt or controls you are going to deploy in an on-prem environment. Forget about the cloud. Cloud is only a medium. I am just saying that if the same thing, the same requirement, the same controls can be done under an on-prem model, the same thing would be done on the cloud environment also. If the question is whether how it is done, as in who is going to do it, whether it is the cloud native or the cloud service provider, whether they are going to do it, or the expertise from the customer side it is going to do it. Again, depends upon the kind of requirements that one has. I mean, I am assuming this was the question.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. This is coming from Murugan Munpara, and his question is, how to do data encryption at rest on cloud? Sumit, would you like to take this? Data encryption at rest on cloud?
Yeah, I think most clouds right now provide data encryption at rest or data encryption in motion. I think it's something which is part of all clouds, all major providers at least, from what I know. I think it's also the reason. I think it's fairly simple to do it on the cloud, especially at rest. Even on-prem, I think most storages currently support at rest encryption. I think unless he's using a database, somebody's using a data store which is proprietary, let's say something like a MongoDB, then they might require a like an enterprise license of that particular proprietary software. Otherwise, if you use a native services of a cloud, be it an object storage or a document store or a MySQL RDS services, I think all these services natively support data encryption at rest. You can also integrate with your own keys. There are key management systems which you can use. You can either use their own key management system, or you can bring your own key management systems from different third-party provider and then use that. I think it's fairly simple to use, and it's quite popular and required by many compliances now, including PCI. I think NIST also recommends it very highly.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and discussing cloud research strategy with us on this platform. Ambuj, Sumit, Dr. Sharma, thank you so much for joining us.